Hey guys, welcome back to this show. This week, we are going to psychoanalyze a Simpsons episode, Homer versus Lisa and the Eighth Commandment. Now, why would we psychoanalyze these early Simpsons episodes? Is it because I'm stuck in 1991 when this episode came out? Yeah, of course, that's part of it. But the other part of it is I do think that there is an effortless kind of humor to especially these early Simpsons episodes. And the thing about humor is humor precisely because there is psychological truth to it. That's in part what makes it humor. And yeah, you can find me other shows that cram a bunch of jokes in there, notably Family Guy, Arrested Development. These are chock full of jokes, but that there's something about these early Simpsons episodes. It's like they're not even trying to be funny, but it's just naturally funny, which indicates that there's just this vein of psychological truth there. They're saying something that we all kind of get, and they're doing it in, of course, a fun way. Now, I mean, do these Simpsons writers, do they understand these gold nuggets of psychological truth? No, I mean, they couldn't explicate it, but doesn't mean that it's not there. Like the religious guy, does he understand psychology and the archetypes to know about Jesus and what he represents and why it's important? No, he doesn't know it, but he gets it. He can't really explicate it, but that doesn't mean he doesn't get it. And I think we could say the same about these Simpsons writers and these nuggets of truth sprinkled throughout this episode. So let's start off. We begin in 1220 BC, 1221 BC, something like that, Mount Sinai. You have the biblical version of Homer and this guy who carves graven images. And what I love about this is they're both totally okay with the other one's sinning. By the way, when we talk about sin here, it's going to be, I mean, if you want to use sin in the context in which we typically understand it today, that's fine. It doesn't matter to me. It's not going to interfere with how much you love this episode. But I'm going to use the now famous, Aramaic translation of sin, which is simply to miss the mark. You got an A-, or you got a C+ in the spelling test. You could have studied harder, got an A-, something to that effect. That is sinning, right? That's a sin. You missed the mark, and that's how I'm going to use it here. So each one is totally happy with the other guy's sinning. Homer's even stealing from the guy. He's even stealing his graven images. He doesn't care as long as he can continue to sin. As long as, ultimately the psychological sin is avoidance. Each one is happy to be in their avoidance behaviors. So whatever. You go and continue to do things that this one, I mean, society can't function too well if we're just accepting of theft, or if we worship the wrong things, however you take that to be. All right, so I think that's just a really great representation of what sin avoidance. It just perpetuates the problem. Sin is a distraction, and it causes more distraction. It necessarily does that. Yeah, I mean, look, Zohar the adulterer, he's having sex with Homer's wife. Homer doesn't care as long as he can continue to steal. That's like to the extent that sinning avoidance is so much fun. It's not fun, it's not pleasure, but it's a great avoidance of pain. And that's what's represented here very well. But then Moses comes down from Mount Sinai, and here we have like a cool, it's like a negative image of them. It's not actually a negative image. It's like a negative image, like I just said. And like in Drudge Report, is that still around? Like when they would have a picture of Hillary, would always be her negative image, and she would look evil. Or Scott Pilgrim versus the World, which I maintain is not as bad as some people may claim it is. Scott faces off against Negached. He has this cool negative image, so they're kind of being shown their inverse of themselves as Moses comes down, like, society is going to turn upside down. And so Moses comes down and reads off in no particular order the 10 Commandments. This is just funny. Everybody looked busy. Everybody looked busy avoiding. No, Moses is coming down to tell you to not avoid. What you think is busy is actually a distraction. I just think that's funny. Okay. So here we just have more of an indication that they all knew what each one was doing. Haha, you can't sleep with my wife anymore. That's what he's realizing. And haha, Homer, you can't steal anymore. See, he knew that he was stealing all of this stuff. The guy who carves graven images, Homer was stealing, didn't care. Just a fun representation of, well, not just avoidance, but how avoidance works and how it gets perpetuated throughout society. Now we're in present day, and we have the cable company sends over this, what Flanders says is a flim-flam guy. Flanders just wanted the Arts and Crafts channel, which I think is a hilarious thing for Flanders to want. Maybe there's something here about the fixer, the guy who comes to fix Flanders cable is the problem. I don't know, that's probably a stretch. But Homer overhears them, and Homer really doesn't know what's going on. So I think it's interesting to note here that sin is introduced into this episode because, well, through the religious guy, through Flanders. Because Flanders complains to Homer. Flanders, in a sense, plays the victim. He does the woe is me thing, and he says, can you believe the world today? Can you believe that the cable company would send over this flim-flam man to hook me up with the Arts and Crafts channel? Yeah, he just wanted to give me illegal cable. Can you believe that? That's how Homer finds out about the illegal cable, is through the... I mean, yeah, Flanders is the good guy. He's the moral guy, but he just doesn't have the psychological strength to maintain his morality, so it doesn't matter. Your morality doesn't matter if you don't have the identity, if you don't have the well-regulated emotions to handle it. And Flanders doesn't, even though he has all the moral ideals in the world. He complains to Homer. Homer finds out about it. And then, this is, I mean, is it just me, or is this just the greatest scene in television history? When Homer goes out into the street to stop the cable guy. And what does Homer do at the last moment? Is he closes his eyes. Right? He lacks awareness. Like, in order for Homer to get himself to do what he needs to do, in order for him to steal, to get illegal cable at the last moment, he needs to close his eyes. Or in Twin Peaks, he needs to avert his gaze. The whites of the eyes, is represented by the pale horse, allegedly. You got to look away. You got to have these blind spots. And sometimes you need to knowingly blind yourself to what you do in order to get yourself to do what you kind of want to do, but not really. In order to sin, in order to miss the mark, in order to act in a less than morally upright way. Great. I just think that's just a great representation here. And it kind of portrays the gravity of what this episode is going to get into. Like, Homer is closing his eyes in front of a guy who drives a truck who he doesn't even know. I mean, that's pretty cool. I think this is great imagery. And then here we have Homer almost getting run over, but yeah, he's not run over. He doesn't die, but he does lie supine here, which of course indicates weakness, indolence, the opposite of prostrate or, the downward facing Old Testament kind of prayer. You fall on your face and pray. So weakness, right? Well, which that's not really the ideal either, I would argue. You can either lie supine or prostrate. Not prostate. You don't lie prostate. That's a different kind of line. But you can either lie supine, you can either be weak or submit to a higher power. You're not looking forward, though. That's somehow not an option here, which I think indicates a false dichotomy here in the liberal boomer mentality that created the show that may come into play later. But I just want to indicate that here now. So how's Homer going to rationalize doing this? He had to close his eyes at first, but now I think he has rationalizations here. So you've decided to steal cable. So when the cable guy is in his house fixing him up, Homer's a little bit worried. He's like, oh, is this okay? I mean, am I going to get in trouble? Homer's actually not 100% gung-ho with the cable. He knows that it's wrong, but the cable guy hands him this pamphlet. The fix brings the rationalization. If you not sure what, if you don't have any rationalizations for something that is sinning, if for something that misses the mark for you, don't worry. Just do the thing. You will come up with rationalizations. The fix for the issue, the avoidance of the issue, brings all the rationalizations you would ever want. And that's what the cable company or the cable guy shows up with. He brings the rationalizations. One of them is this is the first rationalization. Myth: cable piracy is wrong. Fact: cable companies are big faceless corporations, which makes it okay. So you play the victim. You say cable companies are these big faceless corporations. Again, Simpsons, especially at this time, Matt Groening, liberal boomer, and I maintain that The Simpsons is Matt Groening, or Matt Groening is The Simpsons. It didn't get bad. It only got bad when Matt Groening left to do Futurama, which was a quality show at first, and it may have been later on. That's a discussion for a later episode. But this is what liberal boomers hate, right? They don't like big faceless corporations, but even... So I almost see this as like Matt Groening or the kind of mentality that went into this. Like they would... Like this is a good rationalization for them to get illegal cable. So it's like a challenge to them to work through this rationalization. Cable companies are big faceless corporations, but it's still not okay. You're playing the victim. You are dehumanizing a company. I get that company is not a human, but it's a collection of humans. It's run by humans. So when you dehumanize them, what happens when you dehumanize others is you dehumanize yourself, and that's what begins to happen here. I think, this is great. So the first thing that they watch on cable is some home shopping network, and they're selling Poopsie the Clown. Was $89.95, now $29.95, 3 sold. I mean, it's just crap. Right? Poopsie the Clown, it's crap. That's all you're gonna get with cable. That's funny. And then Homer, what happens? Oh yeah, so don't you hate it when you go to the bathroom and there's no toilet paper? This is just like a really bad. Go back and watch comics from the 80s or early 90s. It's not good. That the comedy now is way better. I know we lionize comedians from the past, and I know there are good ones. I'm not saying they're like Richard Pryor. I think that's true. He really was as funny as people make him out to be. Who's the other guy I complain about? Who's the Gen X mascot who I complain about? I forget. It doesn't matter. But there's a lot of bad comedy back in the 80s, and my family had illegal cable as well. I don't, I have no negative view of them because they did. I just mentioned that because I remember watching comedians like this in the early 90s. Like standing up. There's always the brick wall, which just quintessential 80s, 90s comedy backdrop. But it's a lame joke, right? It's a lame joke. Yeah, that's the point. And Homer thinks it's funny. It's not funny. This is just more... Homer thinks this is great. Homer thinks that there's some kind of connection here. We connect over humor, but this is a lame joke that it's a fake connection. It's a pastiche. And then this is probably my favorite scene or shot of the episode when Homer introduces the cable to the family. And here we have what? Looking at the family, looking at the Simpson family through the television's perspective, indicates what that point that Jung stresses ad nauseum. We're going to get to a good ad nauseum joke here. That Jung stresses ad nauseum, which is neurosis is autonomous. Neurosis takes on a life of its own. Neurosis is like a little man living in your brain, living in your psyche that has a life of its own, that has its own willpower. Now you can manage it. You can manage it and, you can work with it, you can communicate with this neurosis, but it is good to think of it as like this separate thing inside of you that has ends unto itself. And I think this is a great representation of that. You have the TV, you have the cable looking at the Simpsons family. It is now a member of the, it is a character in the episode now. And I just think that this is a great representation of that. Which sounds really bad. Oh, the neurosis is autonomous. Yeah, that sounds bad, but also an autonomous neurosis brings with it its own resolution. It carries the seeds of its own destruction. If you let the neurosis work itself out, it will not only diminish from your life, but it will make you more psychologically healthy as it does so. And that's what's going to happen here. The neurosis will bring about its own resolution when you're aware of what it is. When you're aware of what the neurosis is. And Homer does become more aware of it inadvertently. You could actually say the neurosis causes the so-called inadvertent awareness of its own self. This is great. A little gif here of Homer, and this is what happens when we first partake in the neurosis, and it does feel good. And that's why we have neurosis. That's why we have sin, because it is a quick fix. There's pain in our lives. Homer's in a dead-end job he doesn't like. Maybe there's some issues from his childhood that we're going to bring up later that he wants to distract himself from. Probably why he drinks a lot of beer. The same reason why he wants the cable. Because Homer wants to be distracted from some stuff, and he's so happy here because he has his distraction. I just love that self-satisfied, quick nod. What does Marge say? Something to the effect of, how can we afford this? And Homer says, nothing a month, I think we can swing that. Just loving the fact that he has free cable. And we have our second second rationalization. Most movies shown on cable get 2 stars or less and are repeated ad nauseum. This will give you nausea. This fix to the neurosis, this distraction, this sin will give you nausea. It's bad for you. It's not going to be fun. And we know it. That's part of the rationalization. But you're going to do it anyway. Because you have pain that you really don't know how to manage and you need to distract yourself from it. So how does Marge get wrapped up into this is because I love this. The network for women is called Roar, which, is that where Katy Perry got the name for that song? I swear it's not on my Spotify playlist. But, how to cut your medical bills in half, first aid bill in half by making your own Band-Aids. And Marge goes, ooh, that's a good idea. So that kind of gets Marge into it. And I think that's interesting because Marge's weak point, well, you could argue it's a weak point, is the family. The rationalization here, the implication of it is, it will be good for the family. Having cable will be good for the family if I can learn about, how to make my own Band-Aids. Which indicates, great psychological truth. Most of our really good rationalizations come from codependence, come where we think we're doing the right thing. Think we're being nice. It's codependence, but we call it niceness. And that's where our most powerful rationalizations come from, and that's how Marge gets wrapped into it. Let's see what's going on next. This is just an indication of, the Simpsons family. They're not looking at each other, looking at the television. The television's looking at them like they're now interacting with the 6th family member. And there's this montage here where they're watching cable, and this just shows indicates that the neurosis works at first. The sin always works at first. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it. And it's working. What I like here is the, well, I guess I'm this still of this scene doesn't show it very well, but this plant here, this house plant, was about half the height, and now it's twice as high, and it looks healthy. Look, the dog, the cat, and Maggie, the catonic creatures of the Simpson family, are taken care of. They're satiated. Homer and Marge, Marge has this downturn thing, to her mouth. It's not quite a smile, it's a little bit worried, but Homer and Marge are together. Bart's happy. So, it's working. The cables provides the distraction, and there's no downside. No downside. Not yet, at least, right? And then how do we get out of this montage is, Marge says, Homer, let's go to church. And not indicated here is Homer's watching Davy and Goliath, which is this cartoon version of David and Goliath from the 60s or something. And of course, David and Goliath is the theme of this episode. Yes, the neurosis is this large, lumbering beast, but if you get it in exactly the right spot, it goes down. So there's actually two references here, in a sense, is Homer's watching something that is the theme of the episode, but it also indicates what the solution is going to be. There's this neurosis that Homer has, and we need to get it in just the right spot for it to go down. For it to get knocked over, like David knocked over Goliath. It's just great, like layers of meta-ness here. And the other thing I want to say is, where the dog and cat, they're not here. They're not satiated anymore. And then the house plant is dying. Which you barely notice. Which Marge is in front of. You may barely notice if you just watch this the first time, which is that's how it is. When you're affected by neurosis, you barely notice it first. It's your the lower parts of you, the so-called base parts of you, the body parts of you, the dark in you, that's affected the first, and you don't really notice that. And that's why rituals are vital, because rituals get you in touch with those lower parts of you, like walking the dog, getting the dog, taking care of the dog, right? That's why it's important, because it's this point of awareness, because if you think the dog's annoying, or if you think it's just annoying to take the dog to her walk, I'm so busy, I have all this stuff to do. No, you're wrong. Right? The dog needing to walk, that's the psychological truth. And if you're annoyed by that, then that indicates something's not right. That indicates that there's some distraction going on. And then that's why these rituals that we do are really important to our they're not so much important to our psychological growth. They don't make us grow necessarily, but they do let us know when something's not right. And here, something's not right. The plant's not being taken care of. If you're not tending to your garden, something's going on. I don't know what it is, but it's one of those indications. But here, just, it's in the background. Literally in the background of this episode. So Marge comes to Homer. He's watching Davy and Goliath. Says, time to go to church. Homer says, okay. Oh yeah, and this is great. And here we have just a slow zoom and dissolve on the dent in the couch, and then they dissolve to church. But they don't do a lot of dissolves in The Simpsons like this. This is kind of a slow dissolve too. What mean is it, there's a dent in the couch, represents the Simpsons family. I typically wouldn't say that, but because the couch gags are such an integral part of the show, there's a dent in the family. And you don't really notice it. Nobody's really calling attention to it except the camera, except the direction, except in a sense, the audience, the fourth wall, is calling attention to it. We know what's going on. We know that there's now a dent in the family. If you didn't pick up on the dog and the cat not being satiated anymore, possibly If you didn't pick up on the plant being dead, there's a dent here. There's a sermon. Reverend Lovejoy thinks that he's got me with his hi-fi, his boob tube. Remember that when we called television boob tube? Those were the days. His instant pizza pie. I love that I reference a television show when I talk about how television, anyway. His instant pizza pie, and Homer's takeaway is, I guess I didn't include that, but Homer's takeaway is, pizza pie. That would be good right about now. Homer's just focused on the distraction. But in Sunday school, which may indicate something, you go down to the basement, I don't know. Some of my interpretations here may be a stretch. They begin to talk about hell. Bart thinks it's cool, of course, which, may say something about, evil integration. Hell does seem cool when you're younger, and you're just not aware of the consequences of it. It's cool. It is cool. I think later he asks if there are pirates in hell, and she says yes. Oh, cool. What's cooler? If you're a 10-year-old boy, what's cooler than a pirate? They're in hell? Well, I want to go to hell. But fear, the Sunday school teacher uses fear, which I would definitely argue the ethics of that, scaring children into being good by saying if you're not good, you're going to go to hell. But again, we're taking this all symbolically. There's great psychological truth here, and there's still tons of psychological truth in certain religions, even if they are infused with mind-body dichotomy. Well, in fact, I think the mind-body dichotomy indicates how a lot of people think about things. So there's a lot of subjective truth there, you could say. But the fear that the Sunday school teacher uses, it does wake up Lisa, which is representative of the conscience. Not the consciousness, the conscience, the conscience of Homer. This is a Homer-centric episode, so I would say the Simpsons family is his psyche. The house is where his psyche is housed. Lisa here in this episode is not really Lisa, she is the conscience. So fear wakes up the conscience and goes, if I steal, I'm going to go to hell. Well, that's bad. I'm beginning to realize that. Bart asks questions, trying to rationalize hell. Pirates in hell. I don't know, some of these are kind of a stretch, so Martin, the intellectual guy, he treats it in an intellectual way. Whatever, that's more obvious. I think what is interesting in the car ride home indicates both the goodness of God, whatever you take God to mean, whatever you think God is, or he or she is, indicates the goodness of God, yet also the severity of God. Bart realizes he can say hell now, because they learned about hell in Sunday school. And he's loving it. I like this, I like this drawing of Bart as he's saying hell. He's just relishing the fact that he can say hell now, because he learned about hell. It always creeped me out a little bit, but I do think it's funny animation. But it indicates the severity of hell, or the severity of God, which is hell. It's you can go to church, and in church you can learn about hell and say hell, because that's where we learn about metaphysical truths. Truths that are truer than truth itself. And in that context, it's okay to talk about these supposedly, in any other context in life, it's a swear word. It's bad. But when you're learning about reality or the severity of God, then it's okay. In the context of understanding what it is as a metaphysical entity, then it's okay. That's what church represents. That's why when you're no longer in Sunday school, don't swear. Great representation of that idea. And again, it's just effortlessly funny. And you wouldn't necessarily laugh at that. I don't laugh at it, but I love the layers. I love soaking in the layers of that joke. And here we have Homer's dent again. The pets are sleeping in it. I think indicating that, yeah, these lower catonic parts of the Simpsons family, the plant, the pets, they're affected by the illegal cable at first, but it's barely noticeable. What are we talking about next? Oh yeah, this is great. So the first thing they watch after they get home from church is this infomercial about pleasant tasting candy that actually cleans and straightens your teeth. Of course, clean, white, straight teeth are a symbol of moral rectitude, of moral uprightness. Famously, of course, in Les Miserables, Fantine, that symbolizes her downfall, right? As she has to sell her front teeth. But by the way, according to Hugo, a man who famously had tens, perhaps hundreds of prostitutes throughout his life, that was the real downfall of Fantine. Not becoming a prostitute, as it's made out in the musical, but having to sell her teeth and hair. That was the real issue for Hugo. So what this commercial selling, what this infomercial selling, is moral rectitude, and it's an easy solution. Chew or have this pleasant tasting candy. It's BS. It's a false solution. It's a pastiche. It's a counterfeit solution. And then Lisa imagines the family going to hell. This is the first appearance of the devil in The Simpsons. Not as the devil is known later, but the first, appearance of the devil, which indicates how serious this is. Lisa imagines this, and it freaks her out. And then what goes on? Oh, yeah. Something like, what's gotten into Lisa? Bart goes, beats the hell out of me. Homer's upset, of course, indicating that we're no longer in the church. You don't bring up hell. You don't bring up these things that are scary when we're removed from the metaphysical nature of what these things represent. Another way of saying this, I think, is the intellect. Homer's intellectual idea of hell is completely removed from the emotional reality of it. It's okay to talk about hell in church, because it's like, oh, here's this thing out there. It's metaphysical. It's not, doesn't really affect my life. Don't bring it up in my psyche, in my home, on my couch. Well, then it's too real. It's okay to bring it up at church. It's this abstract thing, not in the home. That's a better way of making that point. Eventually got around to it. And then, this is great, right? Another famous scene, it just needs to be in the Library of Congress. After this, Marge and Lisa are in the grocery store. Marge is testing grapes out. She's eating a couple grapes to see which batch to get. And Lisa sees this and freaks out. Has, what later we'll see is an overreaction. Thou shalt not steal, Mom. You stole 2 grapes. That's an issue. But this is what we do. This is what the conscience does. That's why I love this scene. It's exactly what we do when we begin to become aware that we're doing something wrong or that we're avoiding something, is we focus on something that doesn't matter. And our reaction to it is completely overblown. We focus on something that doesn't matter, and our reaction to it is completely overblown. And Lisa knows it, right? Because Marge says, okay, I need a price check on 2 grapes, and the clerk is being sarcastic. He calls into the microphone, the loudspeaker, whatever that is. Says, we need a price check on 2 grapes, 2 measly freaking stinking grapes. Lisa knows. In a way, Lisa's right here because she is beginning to suss out theft in the psyche. Homer's conscious is right here, but it's focused on the wrong thing. And because it's focused on the wrong thing, by dint of being focused on the wrong thing, there's going to be an overreaction. Later, we're going to see when Lisa, Homer's conscious, focuses on the right thing, and she's going to be really calm about it because you're focused on the right thing. Another just great psychological truth there. Yeah, this is the most upset we see. I think, yeah, this is the most upset we see Lisa. Most overtly upset we see Lisa in the entire episode. An episode in which she thinks that the family is going to go to hell. The most upset we see her is over the 2 grapes. I just think that's really good. Lisa comes in, the conscience gets in the way. This is the first time she'll get in the way. Oh yeah, there's something else here. What am I looking? Oh yeah. And when Lisa scolds Marge, existentially, Maggie does something that's worse. She's holding something, and Maggie's so surprised by Lisa screaming at Marge that she drops whatever this is and breaks it. So existentially, something goes on that's much worse. Again, indicating that you're distracted by, it's an issue, but it's definitely not the main issue. It causes more existential problems short term. That's what happens. That's what happens when you begin to face off with your neurosis, is there will be existentially more problems short term. I pretty much guarantee you that's going to happen. Let's see. So Lisa, represented by the conscience, gets in the way. And still Lisa's not quite ready to deal with the neurosis. She's externalizing. She's projecting. She's worried about her being a sinner, as Homer's conscious. She's representing about her family sinning, but the way she describes it, she says, why? Or, Dad, why is the world such a cesspool of corruption? Can't quite put a name to it. Right? Can't quite point her finger to what's going on. I just think it's good. It's just what we do. We project. It's okay. I mean, it's a great step. It's just not an end point. Then how does Homer deal with this? Is okay. I guess I just have this still. So Homer, what he does is he guilts the inner child. This is the formation of a childhood wound because he's putting pressure on Lisa that she's not ready to handle. He's saying, oh, did you pay for the food that you eat? Did you pay for the clothes on your back? Well, run for the hills, Ma Barker, which is, this female gang leader, parodied a bunch. It's like the matriarchal gang leader with her idiot sons. But that's what Homer's doing. He's guilting the inner child, but at the same time, his guilting of the inner child is a manifestation of the childhood wound of, I get to do things. I get to steal cable because I didn't get my needs met when I was a kid. My parents were tuned out. My mom was on the lam. My mom was a criminal on the lam, which we'll find out later in The Simpsons that was the case. So in a sense, Homer is reacting to his own childhood wound by now giving Lisa the childhood wound. Putting her in a situation. I mean, this is what grooming is. This is what sexual grooming is, but any kind of grooming is putting a child in a situation where they're just not intellectually, psychologically ready to handle. Lisa's a child. She's not supposed to provide for the clothes on her back. She's not supposed to work a job to feed herself. That's what mom and dad are for. So I deserve to do it. I deserve to steal cable because of all my childhood trauma, right? And that's represented very well here, right? And then Lisa thinks that's spurious reasoning, and Homer doesn't get it, which just indicates improper dialogue, inner dialogue, right? The head, the conscience is still trying to reason with the body. It's just not working, right? There's no connection there. And then halfway through, right? Halfway through the episode, now it's time to get serious. The main conflict, the main fight, the bout to knock the other guy out is introduced. Time to get serious, and this is when the neurosis really begins to provide its own solution. I mean, we just get this wrong all the time in psychology. Psychology, self-help. Oh, you have a problem? What you need to do is get rid of the problem. Oh, you have suicidal thoughts? Well, just change the thoughts. You have emotions you don't like? Well, just change your emotion. You're in a funky mood? Oh, well, just go do a bunch of deadlifts. That'll get you out of the mood, and it will. But you're trying to erase, you're trying to stamp out the neurosis. No. The neurosis is the solution. The neurosis is trying to speak to you. When you have the thought to jump in front of the subway, when you're on the subway platform, okay, obviously the solution isn't jump in front of the subway platform, or jump from the subway, but, as I indicated in another article that I wrote a while ago, a part of you does need to die. The old, outdated part of you that no longer serves you, the part of you that you need to digest to make nutrition out of. Don't just throw that away in the garbage. Eat it. You got to eat it. You got to be aware of that neurosis. It's vital for psychological growth. And we live in a culture. Oh, the world today, we live in a culture where it's just completely lost on people. Completely lost. And then we wonder why nobody's regulated when it comes to the presidential election, or, whatever. I mean, need some coffee here. It's 2:47 a.m. so we can make it. Let's continue. We're almost done. Not really, maybe. Anyway, the about to not knock the other guy out is introduced. Homer stands up, that the conscience, it's out of the picture. Nope. Get out of here, Lisa. We don't need you anymore. But it doesn't matter because there's a solution here. At the lowest moment, right? At Homer's lowest moment, arguably, he's knocking Lisa off his lap because he's excited about this title fight. This is the solution here. Homer's no longer supine, now he's prostrate. He's praying to the cable. And this is wait, the plant's back. Okay. What's the psychological truth there? Leave it in the comments. But by the way, any other thing that I miss, please let me know in the comments. If you think I'm a big fat idiot and I'm ugly, please let me know in the comments. It's a lot of fun to hear that stuff. But I think this is important because Lisa just sighs here. It's like, like when you're 15 and your parents just had enough with you and they're saying, we're not even mad, we're just disappointed. That's the worst. And this is where Lisa begins to, you could say, lose respect for Homer, which Marge does indicate later. But it's barely noticeable, right? Just a slight sigh here, barely noticeable. And that's really when you begin to lose respect for yourself, is you never notice it at first. And then in the shower, this is just such a great scene. They're in the decontamination showers. I mean, how often do they have the decontamination showers in The Simpsons at the nuclear power plant? I think it may come up again, but rarely. So why does it come up here? Well, I think we're going to see, because they're talking about the fight. Where are they going to watch it? Well, they can't watch it. They can listen to the play-by-play on the radio and then watch stills in the nightly news. And Homer's just loving this. The self-satisfaction in Homer, just like he was with Marge earlier, of, nothing a month. Yeah, I think we can swing that. And Homer loves this because he knows that he's going to have the fight. And Homer needs to love it, right? Because he just lost the respect of his daughter. And he knows it. He knows because when the cable guy, came over initially, he was worried about it. He's just distracting himself now. He lost the respect of his daughter. That's painful. And so he needs to distract himself from that. And one great way to do that is to say, just get the approval, I guess you could say, of his friends. Which is emotionally disgusting. Which is, You begin to lose respect for yourself. And the way you distract yourself from that is to get your friends to think that you're really cool. Is to fill that void. You lost your daughter's respect. Nothing fills that, right? So the approval of your friends, again, just the pastiche, counterfeit self. And that's why I think they're in the shower. And the scene ends on, pass the pumice, please. Because it's so gross. Ew. You know, you'll often hear women talk about when guys hit on them, and it's really creepy. And of course, there's nothing to do with the guy's look. It's just the guy has an unconscious. It's okay to have an agenda if you're talking to a girl, but if you're unaware of the agenda, it could just come off as, of course, really creepy because you're just not present. And women who are, of course, more sensuous, sensual, but more sensuous, more emotional, they can't really describe it. It just comes off as ew, like instant yuck. Ew, I need a shower. I hear that. And this is when the neurosis really begins to conspire. The neurosis conspires for you. Because now Homer's psyche, which, yeah, okay, we could say it's represented as the family, but it could also be the entire town is going to come together. Homer's relationships are coming together in one spot. Right, like David and Goliath. Just get it in the right spot. Homer's relationships come together, different parts of Homer's psyche come together, and it doesn't even make sense, right? That's why it seems like a conspiracy. The neurosis conspires for Homer's psychological well-being. So now Mr. Burns wants to come over. Why would Mr. Burns? He's not into boxing, is he? And if he is into boxing, why would he want to? I guess I don't have it here, but what? I mean, you guys know the episode, of course. Mr. Burns is he is disgusted by the fact of going to this blue-collar worker's home. The mangy dog, the rusty screen door, whatever he says. But he's still going to go. It doesn't make any sense. It's completely out of character of Mr. Burns, but that's what happens is the neurosis conspires for you. Once you begin to become more aware of it. And Homer's unconsciously becoming more aware of it by inviting people over to his home, by inviting more aspects of his psyche, more aspects of his relationship to his home. I just think that's a good scene, or a good shot there. And then Homer goes to the bar. Again, it doesn't make sense. Where are we going to watch the fight? We can't, why doesn't, why doesn't Mo have the fight? Why doesn't he have cable? Again, it's just the silliest reason. Because he got a mechanical bull and he's going to stand by his decision. It's kind of a funny joke just to think that there's this mechanical bull in the corner with cowboys on that they've never shown before, but it's just funny. It's funny because it doesn't make sense how things are conspiring for Homer, but this is exactly what neurosis does. This is why if you're depressed, you can't just deadlift it away. I love deadlifts as much as the next guy. But don't confuse that. Don't confuse the good mood you have after you do deadlifts as psychological health. Yeah, you do that thing, you're walking around. I have better, my posture is just way better now. That makes you feel good. I get it. That's not psychological health. That's a good mood. All right. And then, so Jimbo, I mean, more famously, back in the grocery store scene, Jimbo was shown stealing in the background, but here he's stealing in the Quickie Mart too. This is a quick little, I don't know, just something for Simpsons trivia night. Again, more example of the universe, whatever reality, God, the neurosis, awareness conspiring for Homer as he invites Apu over, and Apu is Apu's happy to come over because he's a Hindu. Hindus are against violence. His brother Sanjay will cover him for him because his brother Sanjay deplores violence of all kinds. So Apu, shouldn't you deplore violence of all kinds? Doesn't really make any sense, but Apu's going to come over. to help, Pooh's Homer's friend, to help in Homer's awareness. So yeah, what's happening here? What's next? Okay, we're going to go to Lisa talking with Reverend Lovejoy, but what's happening up to this point is through the neurosis, through how the neurosis presents in Homer's life as the title fight. Homer's relationships come together, and they do that for the sake of sport, I guess you could say. I don't know, maybe there's something, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe there's something in here that sport makes Homer more aware too. I mean, that's what competition does. It makes us more aware of ourselves, especially sensationalized sports, which I'm going to talk about later. But Lisa goes to Reverend Lovejoy, asks for guidance. Usually Reverend Lovejoy doesn't really care. That's his thing, is he's apathetic. But here he cares. And I think it's important because he offers nuance. Like the Ten Commandments isn't just the Ten Commandments, at least in this episode. It just represents morality. It's like, there's gray area here. You need to honor your father and mother, but not if it's morally wrong. And it's okay to steal a loaf of bread for your starving family as long as you don't put jelly on it. And so he tells Lisa to, stage a protest, not watch. And now the neurosis, the cable, is affecting the children in a more serious way. If this is the Oedipal issue, right? Because you're sexualizing your children. Bart's watching the X-rated channel. Bart's becoming sexualized before he's ready to be sexualized. That, of course, is an indication of the Oedipal parental issue beginning to form. And Homer, realizes, this is, first, I guess, Bart's face, just like that disgusted, sick to your stomach look, that face that all children must feel when they are sexualized. I don't mean overtly sexualized, but again, like Homer did with Lisa previously, by putting his childhood wound onto her. It's grooming in a sense, putting a child in a situation where that he just cannot, even a prodigy of a child, a genius child, wouldn't be able to handle, because his brain just isn't formed enough to deal with sex if you're not having gone through puberty at the very least. It makes you sick to your stomach. So you look at Homer's face. He knows. He knows that this is but what his solution is to, just have a very surface level talk. I mean, in a way, it's a sweet thing that Homer says here. It's only for mommies and daddies who love each other very much, but, it's a minimal conversation. It's more hopeful than anything else. He's not really engaged. Just as Bart promised, he won't do it again. That's what's going on here. And then Lisa comes in, and this is when she really finally confronts Homer, confronts the issue. Unlike when she confronted Marge about stealing the 2 grapes, it was all out of control. But when she confronts the issue for exactly what it is, she's extremely calm and self-assured. And boy, isn't that the truth. In group we talk about having anger, resentment stored up as like a reservoir. Or like a volcano, the magma is building up underneath that's about to explode. And all it takes is just a minor earthquake. And it erupts. And that's how we feel. And that's sometimes why we feel like we can't express our anger, because there's too much there. And if I begin to express it, it's going to blow up and cause more problems in the short term, which of course it will cause more problems in the short term. That's the rub here. But when you confront the issue for exactly what it is, when you confront the source of the anger, it's fascinating to me, and it never gets old, how you can have all this, what feels like a reservoir of anger, but when you confront the issue for exactly what it is, as the words pass through your lips, you immediately calm down. Calm down more than you ever would otherwise. All the Xanax in the world would not make you this calm. It's calm and sober. Unlike how it would be if you took a bunch of Xanax. And Homer, Homer has this stupid grin on his face because he's trying to distract Lisa still. He's like, "Ooh, look, Lisa, there's horses at Belmont. There's like a race. There's a horse race. Lisa likes horses. Maybe she'll like a horse race." No, the last thing that Lisa would like probably is a horse race. But Homer doesn't get that, indicates the disconnection, indicates that all cable has to offer is all the Neurosis has to offer is counterfeit. And the conscious knows it's one. I mean, Lisa is incredibly self-assured here. She knows that she's won. She knows she's in the right. She's confronted the issue. She's doing the right thing. And now it's just really a matter of time. And Homer knows it. Marge wants Homer to disconnect the cable. They're in the bed when Marge and Homer discuss, serious issues. Marge wants him to disconnect the cable, but he's not ready to see it. And I think what, Homer knows because of, he makes this face. He knows that he's a thief and he's losing the respect of Lisa, which Marge brings up here, but he's still not ready. He still wants to go on one last bender. He knows the issue's there, but he wants to stomp it out of existence, put it in the dark, and I think that's represented very well by him putting his foot down on the issue. You see the issue there, but you want to, keep it hidden. Maybe I can get away with it one last time. Maybe I can go on one last bender. That's what Homer wants to do here. Now we have the beginning of Act 3. Homer is deep in his neurosis. He's complaining about what's on the cable. One of these channels that he flips through is the what he was previously entertained by is the gum or candy. It was candy, right? That candy that straightens and cleans your teeth. But he's annoyed by it. It's like all the same crap. 85 channels, whatever he says here. It's all the same crap, nothing new. And that's how Neurosis is, right? I mean, Neurosis is boring. It's boring. It's the same thing over and over again. You can't get out of it. And so there's new issues, new temptations. The cable guy, he comes in, he has a clearly a stolen car stereo that he wants to sell Homer. He gets in through the doors in the house and the doors in Homer's psyche that Homer doesn't have control over because he doesn't have a strong boundary. So these issues, these temptations get in. You're the stoic, tuned out guy is complaining because all the women who he dates are, borderline. It's like, dude, that is a reflection of you and your poor psychological health. These people come in, you let them in, you're not aware of it because you can't regulate your emotions. You can't regulate emotions. You don't know what emotions are. You've been freebasing Epictetus for the last 12 and a half years. Oh, and BPT girl just happens to show up. Oh, it's probably a problem with culture. It must be. Women these days, right? It's just not. It's like, I would like to say close but way off, but it's not close, and it's way off. And yeah, maybe we'll go see his neighbor. He's not home, even better. Okay, now the issue is really starting to affect the neighborhood. Homer's response to this is to lock up the doors. Not a healthy boundary. Not doors. Not windows where the lock's on the inside or the handle's on the inside and people just can't come in. He's putting up walls. He's turning the doors and windows into walls, and now he lives in a prison. There's this keep out sign. He's isolating, right? This is isolation. And isolation, it's great because it's part of the neurosis, but it also invariably leads to shame. Those are synonymous psychologically, isolation and shame. Tries to keep everybody out. Yeah, he said, can't be too careful. Everybody's a thief. Of course, that's a projection. He's still dealing with the issue as a projection. What's next? Oh, yeah. So now Bart's selling tickets to watch the X-rated channel. It's called Top Hat Entertainment. I think that's just Bart mimicking. It's just a good mimic of what's going on. Yeah, Bart really doesn't understand, so he's just taking it at face value. And that's good. Good continuity here, right? Because there's bars in the windows. And this is their... the boys, their mouths are agape. By the way, I mean... Oh, okay, so this does represent the cable negatively affecting the children, but I mean, by today's standards, this is actually healthy, right? Like, what? I was thinking about this as I was making the stills for this. What percentage of young men, when they watch porn for the first time, what percentage of them do it alone now? Alone, on the internet, as opposed to when I was a kid back in my day. I mean, talk about a conspiracy. It's like all the boys from the neighborhood would get together, typically summer, you'd go to a house where a parent was at work. We'd triangulate all these things before cell phones. We'd figure it out. Okay, my dad has a porno tape here. We'll take it to your house and we'll watch it together. And you would talk about it. You're like, what's going on? Oh, it's like she has a butt, but it's in the front and it's hairy. Like, what's going on? A lot more wholesome, I think, than doing it. Right? It's just one of those things where I think somebody from my generation, an old millennial, I mean, spiritually, I'm Gen X, but technically, I guess I'm a millennial, but I think we just have a very difficult time relating with younger men and the problems that they have with porn because we were just never put in those situations early on. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, yeah, this is an indication of how the neurosis in a family, the neurosis in an individual can affect the community, but maybe it's kind of wholesome by today's standards. I don't know. Oh yeah, then Homer comes in, sees everybody, and Bart says something to the effect of, oh, so you can break the rules, but I can't. Again, Homer knows he's in the wrong. It's just more evidence building. More evidence building that Homer's a thief and he can't lie to himself for too much longer. This is a great establishing shot because the bell tolls. There's like a church bell tolls indicating that it's Judgment Day. Everybody's coming together. The car's pulling up. People are coming over him, but, there's really no connection. Like, Barney just brings this lame beer, gives it to Marge, the cat, the Katana creatures. They want out. They're out of here. The cat leaves. Apu brings over beef jerky, and there's a poor connection here because Homer goes, oh, what, you swiped that from work? And Apu goes, certainly not. What has been implied here? Again, there's just no connection. People are over, but there's no connection. Lisa gives her protest one last time. She gets in the way. It's bothering people. Mo comes over. He brings a mug, and so Homer says, wait, I've already stolen a bunch of mugs from Mo, so he has to go throw them out. Then Mr. Burns comes over. Evidence is building, right, that Homer's a thief. It's not the neurosis, it's Homer's lack of awareness of the neurosis. That's the evil, that's the sin. And just more evidence is building, conspiring for, Homer's freaking out, but ultimately this is for Homer. So Mr. Burns comes. Oh yeah, and before Mr. Burns gets to the door, he goes to Bart. You gotta help me. And Homer says, you gotta help me hide all the stuff that I borrowed from work. Oh, you mean all the stuff you stole from work? That's what Bart says, from the mouth of babes. Evidence builds. I love this picture of Lisa at Homer's home workstation as he's cleaning up all the stuff he stole from work. Like, even Homer's picture that he has of Lisa is of her judging him. Like, the conscience is always there. Again, no connection. Mr. Burns thinks that Barney's Homer. It's not real. The cops come over. Homer thinks that he's being busted for having illegal cable, but of course they just want to watch the fight. Society's complicit. There's a great rationalization. Society doesn't care. You can steal cable. Nobody's going to care. Okay. Here we have Homer lying, all these false idols, right? To harken back to the opening scene, all these false idols, the cable, society, authority, what society typically thinks of as authority. It's not real. You're stuck at a lower stage of childhood development if you think that the police or the law is an idol. Marge, being the emotional center, comes out, gives sustenance to the conscience, but can't really help the conscience too much. It doesn't really take any action, but feeds. What did I say? Provides sustenance for the conscience. And says, when you love somebody, you just have to have faith that they'll do the right thing in the end. And then, what happens here? Okay, so Homer imagines that he's in prison, but what gets Homer to imagine that he's in prison, which ultimately gets him to turn and realize what he's doing, is he relates with Dredrick Tatum's story, who's of course a representation of Mike Tyson, and Dredrick Tatum's out of prison now. He's paid his debts to society, and Tatum's crimes remind Homer of his own crimes. Which may say something here. I mean, this is probably a stretch. Let me know in the comments. It's not the sports themselves that got Homer to... It is. It's the competition and the awareness that the sports bring out, that the competition brings out. That helps Homer over the edge. But also the sensationalization of sports. Because this fight's been, of course, highly sensationalized. And with sensationalized sports, you get bigger, more aggressive athletes. And it's just bigger, more aggressive athletes more likely to commit violent crimes on the side. Like, we're all, abhorred by, what Ray Rice did, whatever that was 10 years ago, knock out his wife in the elevator. But, you look at the criminal records and how often NFL players beat up their wives or girlfriends, it's horrendous. Well, we select. Not that I think, football is a sensationalized, violent sport. I do think it's objectively the best sport for a bunch of reasons we don't have to get into now. But best sports to watch, at least. Well, I don't know if that's true. One of the best. It's a huge debate in my mind how it goes on about that. Definitely not soccer, though, right? We can at least agree on that. But football's become sensationalized. And when you sensationalize sport, you select for really aggressive guys. When you select for aggressive guys, they're going to be more likely to beat up their wives or do things that make them go to prison. So it's really Dredrick Tatum going to prison because of his aggressiveness that gets Homer to realize what he's done. And he goes, ooh, I'm not that different from Dredrick Tatum. I'm committing my own crimes. Homer is making a connection. This is the first connection that he makes in the entire episode. Right? And it's kind of a stretch, but it's still a connection. The neurosis carries with it its own solution. Homer realizes he's a prisoner in his own home, as indicated by this scene. And then he comes outside, and Lisa says, Dad, I'm really proud of you. You may have saved your soul. Yeah, at the worst possible time. That's Homer's response. Well, yeah, doesn't salvation always come at the worst possible time? Because we need to be in pain to see what we're doing. We need to be in pain to see what we're doing. The next day, Homer wouldn't make this decision because he just wouldn't be in pain. The fight's over. He can go on to distract himself again. But right at this moment, when his family's not there, relating with Tatum and everything that's been building up to that moment, it is incredibly painful. It's incredibly painful for him. Of course, salvation always comes at the worst possible time. Of course it does. If it didn't come at the worst possible time, it wouldn't be salvation. And then, we're going into the last scene after the fight, everybody leaves. There's this great little conversation between Burns and Apu. I was going to make a point about that, but I ended up leaving it. Clearly written by John Swartzwelder. So Homer climbs up he's beginning to climb up the telephone pole to cut the cable, but Bart pleads with him. Bart's trying to get Homer to not cut the cable, and what is Bart's last salvo? Do you remember what he says? Dad, think of all these shows. You remember what the last show that Bart brings up? I think it's very telling. He brings up Joe Franklin, which is a guy, he supposedly invented the talk show or that talk show format. He had a show in the 60s, in the late 50s, early 60s, when Homer would have been a little kid. Homer was raised on television. So Joe Franklin really means something to Homer. It's probably something very soothing to Homer. Because, again, Homer grew up in a chaotic household. Grandpa has issues. Abraham Simpson has issues. His mom was on the land. We find out later his mom wasn't there. He needed some emotional soothing early on in his life, and that's what television did for him, and that's what, in particular, most likely, Joe Franklin did. Homer tries to get Bart to not cut the cable by bringing up what exactly television means to him. And it's powerful, because you can't blame Homer. Can't blame Homer for that, because he was a kid. It's not his fault. It's his responsibility now to deal with the issue, and that's what he's doing. By climbing up the telephone pole, by, bearing his cross. But I just think that's a great reference. Joe Franklin, that probably gets Homer right at the nougaty center of his neurosis. Oh, I get to watch Joe Franklin because of, my needs weren't met as a child. That is perpetuation of the childhood wound. Homer goes to cut the cable, he cuts the wrong thing, and this, I think, the two halves of the street, the street going through, this is not representative of your mind, of your psyche. You have the two halves here, and he's inadvertently shutting it down. Both sides. Goes to sleep. After he ascends the cross, he dies. Or he pseudo-dies, right, by going to sleep. The lights turn off, which means, it's a death, time to sleep and reflect, and that's how we integrate conflicts, and that's what we need to do to integrate our own conflicts. Thank you guys. I have a lot of fun going through these episodes. There's just a lot of good stuff here. Hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you liked, what you didn't like. If you think this is all BS and I'm making it up, please let me know. I don't know. I mean, people always say, oh, if you're mean to me on the internet, I'm going to block you. I mean, maybe I'm just not popular enough, not nearly relevant enough to start blocking people. But even mean comments, I always think that there's an element of truth there. I mean, I love it. It's fine. I won't take it personally. Well, maybe I will. Maybe it can hurt my feelings. But any comment, just leave it below. We do free consultations, animusempire.com/schedule. If you just want to reach out and talk with somebody, do what Homer did. Begin to make connections. Whatever you're going through, whatever neurosis that you're going through right now, it is its own solution. And part of that solution is you're going to do something stupid as reach out and talk to me about it, which you never would have done unless you had that neurosis. So we do that. animusempire.com/schedule. Thank you guys. And, remember that, what do I want you to remember? Nothing. Just, I hope The Simpsons brings you as much joy and as much pain as it brings to me.